edition of the Scale Tech Talks podcast. Today we've got Duncan Harper, who's the Senior Director of Technology at online retailer or online jewellery retailer Blue Nile. So firstly, thanks for joining. I know it's been in the works for a while, this one, hasn't it, Duncan?
It has, and it's great to get it done.
Yeah, perfect. Well, could you just give us a brief intro for the listeners to learn a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. I've been in technology for far too long now, for I'm gonna say 25 years. I started out as a dev, as an engineer back in London, and I worked through financial, e-commerce, travel organizations, big and small, including some startups.
Yeah.
And I've been in technology leadership for approximately 15 years. I moved across the Atlantic about 10 years ago. So I'm now on the west coast of the US in Seattle.
Yep.
My relationship with information security is it's kind of been on both sides. It's been as a developer, annoyed by it, but then as a technology leader, more and more involved, and sort of finally leading up the InfoSec part of the organization over the past couple of years.
Yeah, so I think that's what we're going to talk about today, isn't it? The importance of InfoSec and where you see it fitting within organizations and how it should be at the forefront of any project within technology. So
Correct, yeah.
I imagine everyone who listens to this podcast will know about it, but just for those who don't, what is InfoSec, just on a lower level?
You may get 100 different answers if you ask 100 different people. To me, it is securing every single layer of your application, top to bottom, so that it's so that you can effectively run a business. And it's not sort of securing one particular part or securing the network or securing the infrastructure. It is, a top to bottom focus at every single layer of what can we do to secure our applications so bad actors can't get in and disrupt our business. And that's essentially what it is. It is when it comes down to it, it's a business focused task to ensure that you can still make money every day.
Yeah. Okay. The question I had next is kind of why is it so important? I mean, I think you just answered that. Most companies out there, the importance of the website to generate revenue is at the forefront of their organization. But is there any other reasons why it's important?
There is. I mean, money is a big part of it, but there are so many other costs as well to not doing it correctly. The big costs around the people themselves. So if we take like a basic example where you ignore information security or you don't put as much emphasis on it as you should, then you're going to get a breach. You're going to get attacked. Everyone will.
Yeah.
And if that happens, it's going to cause so much churn within your engineering work across the whole organization.
Yeah.
Specifically, where I'm focused in the engineering teams, that it's going to cost so many people hours to rectify it, to put in place safeguards afterwards.
Yeah.
That it causes a huge amount of disruption. It causes them a huge amount of worry. And so, it's a people cost as well as an actual physical cost to the organization.
Yeah.
So let's take a sort of simple example. Developers love writing code every day. It's what they do. It's their passion, and really dedicated developers also write really good unit tests or functional tests as well to test that their code works. And sometimes we write performance tests as well to check, does it actually scale? Very rarely, even now, is any sort of security testing as part of the engineering effort actually done.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where the downfall is, because if that's not a focus of the engineering team, if it's not kind of baked into the whole process, then when a breach actually happens, the worst thing in the world possible for the engineering team is going to happen is that there's going to be a ton of introspection on them. They are going to get annoyed and bothered by leaders, C-level leaders coming in and saying, why did this break? Why has this security breach happened?
Yeah.
And they are not going to be able to get on with their job, with what they love doing, which is writing code. They are going to have to answer questions. They're going to have to retroactively look at security measures to put in place.
Yeah.
And so, not focusing on InfoSec from the beginning, it's kind of going to interfere with the health of your engineering team in the long run.
Yeah.
And it's going to make them unhappy. It's going to make them feel like there's, all lights are shining on them, and people are just trying to understand why something went wrong, even though it's not necessarily their fault. So it is crucial for the health of the team as well as the performance of the company. When it comes down to it, you'll have a happy dev team if you take security seriously from the beginning.
And obviously you never know when a breach is going to happen. So you could have an engineering team that's working on a large transformation project, or you could have an engineering team that's working on an important project for the organization, and obviously that will get put to one side whilst the breach is happening. And obviously,
absolutely,
I don't know exactly, but when a breach happens, I imagine certainty on how long it will take to fix. I imagine it's not just a day, and then they go back to business as usual things. I imagine it's quite difficult to sort of estimate how important it can be or how bad it can be, I suppose.
Oh, absolutely. It's when something happens, and I've seen this happen a number of times. It's pretty much everyone just has to stop. Everyone downs tools, and it has to, even if you're not to be honest, even if you can't help, even if you're not directly impacted, you have to go and focus on that problem and see what can be done to resolve it. It's incredibly disruptive. And it's and I think your point about if you were in the middle of a big project and something like this happens, you're not just going to lose a few days. If you're in the middle of a big project, it could set you back weeks or months. Because the momentum you build up, because the company will have timelines to get this out. If it doesn't hit a timeline, the next thing, perhaps there's a time critical project which has to be done, and then that'll interfere. And so the knock-on effects can be enormous in terms of when a breach will happen.
Okay. So you mentioned obviously software engineers implementing this, and businesses from day one. So if it isn't the engineers that are focusing on InfoSec from day one and within their code, who normally in an organization would be responsible or focusing on that element?
You normally have an information security officer. Their role is crucial. I've seen their role play out in a number of different, or in a couple of different ways. Sometimes you get information security officers who operate very much in a vacuum and try and dictate to the different teams, the infrastructure teams, the network teams, the dev teams, this is what you've got to do. And it works to a certain extent. But the very best information security officers actually get the engineering teams working with them. And then get the engineering teams becoming advocates for security as well. And I've had the pleasure of working with a few people like that who are really good at getting people on board. And it's not just a case of being nice, it's a case of like educating. And I think that's one of the crucial things is if you can educate a dev team about how important it is to introduce secure coding practices, or introduce external tools which will help filter out some of these bad actors, then you build up a really powerful team, because it's very difficult as one person, as an information security officer, to get much done. But if you can turn other people into advocates, then you're kind of almost generating your own team. It becomes really powerful at that point.
So why should software engineers care about InfoSec?
So when it's going back over some of the points previously, if and when a breach happens, and then they become so disrupted by the churn which happens after a breach, if we take a step back and say, what practices could they have put in the first place? There are some great tools out there which actually run as part of their IDE. So you can, when they're developing code, they in their IDE, they run their tests, they run whatever to make sure their code will actually work. There are plugins you can get, I think Fortify and Sync are a couple of them, but they will actually, they're almost like security scanners. It's fairly brute force, but also it gives you a really good heads up as to, the code you've written has these particular standard security vulnerabilities, and it will give you suggestions about how to fix it as well. And these plugins don't take that long to run. You can run them as part of your check-in process, so it can be sort of super quick and super efficient. And eliminating those basic security vulnerabilities up front can do so much to prevent some sort of major crisis further down the line. That it's super valuable to do that as well.
And that, so I suppose the part that always springs to mind is if you don't check if your code is secure, can you deliver projects quicker? So does it impact project delivery timescales by ensuring that your code is secure? And the only reason I'm saying that is, it kind of reminds me of sort of short-term thinking and long-term thinking from a organization but engineering perspective. When you have a project that's got to be delivered by X, Y, and Z, if you're trying to check the code is secure, you may not hit that deadline, but let's forget about that element and deal with it another day. And it snowballs to when it becomes a huge problem, whereas the other way would be to do it little and often, and then you never encounter the breach, or potentially never encounter the breach.
You're absolutely correct. And I believe the problem actually comes down to when you're starting your project planning, you've got to be, well, so many corners can be cut to deliver a project quickly. But to deliver a project on time you've got to do all the testing, all the QA, but also you've got to include the time it's going to take to ensure your application is secure as well. So you've got to have that in the project plan right up front. So yes, you can deliver more quickly if you don't look at the security of the application you're delivering. Yes, you can. On day one, it'll be a lot sooner than what it would have been if you not a lot quicker, but it would have been quicker than if you included security at the beginning. But a few months down the line, maybe not even a few months, a few weeks down the line, when it is breached, that project, that application will stop making money. It will have to be disabled. As we talked about, the team will basically have to stop work on everything and go and concentrate on this security breach. And you're potentially looking at, I've seen weeks or even months lost due to not ensuring properly secure applications. Now, that is, it's probably 10 times more in lost time than you'd have to put into ensuring your application is secure in the first place. So yes, you can deliver a lot, quicker, but it's going to cost you in the long term, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen fairly quickly, that breach.
I remember when we first spoke about it, and you said a breach is inevitable. It just is, whether it's tomorrow or in 5 years' time. It's something that pretty much will happen, which I found quite interesting.
And especially over the past probably 5 years, there's been a huge rise in automation of these attacks. So go back 10, 20 years, and you'll have a kid sitting in his bedroom, trying to look at the big companies and see if he can sort of make mischief. Nowadays, it's hugely automated. So you will get, there are, millions of potential breaches going on every day. It's just these pings going out to see, okay, is there any, of these, basic security holes, across any of these applications, across any of these organizations. And then you are going to be attacked. You are going to be potentially breached. Now, if one of these organizations, detects that there's some sort of vulnerability, that's when, they will put a lot more focus on, and perhaps like the human interaction will happen. You will actually get people trying then to, make some serious mischief and make some serious money, for these organizations out of it. And they're professional organizations now as well. They make millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars out of this. They operate like real businesses with a true sort of distributed model. As we spoke about last time, some of them, like Lockbit is a prime example. They have their own InfoSec team. They have their own disaster recovery. They operate because they're kind of like the best people to understand it. They know that they themselves are going to be attacked because of the nature of what they're doing. And so they build in their own safeguards to ensure that they can continue running as a business if the worst happens. It's amazing how professional that side of the world has got. And so it means, because the hackers, the bad actors, are so professional, it means from a security point of view, we need to be, completely on top of it, and we need to be completely professional about it as well,
Yeah.
because it's not just some, kid sitting in a bedroom trying to cause problems anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a genuine business, genuine industry, I suppose, because there won't just be a few businesses around the world who operate that way. Like you say, there'll be a multi-million-pound industry in itself. And you touched on before, project planning and making sure that you leave room and leave time to focus on security. So, who within an organization, you're director, extremely senior. I imagine that the responsibility has to be, developers 100%. But if project planning has to include that, does the responsibility sit with the leadership team, who's then passed on to the management team to make sure that that's so almost top down to developers, but those are the ones who are kind of hands on, um,
Yeah,
implementing it day in day out.
yeah, there has to be. Again, it comes back to education.
Yeah,
It has to, the best i- information security officers will educate the leaders, the project managers,
yeah,
to ensure that, you know it, everyone knows that, you know an extra block of time, or it will take
yeah,
slightly longer to effectively, develop and release a project to make it
yeah,
secure. And yes, it's getting the engineers, understanding it and becoming advocates is great, but also
yeah,
you're right, it has to come top down as well. And the leaders have to understand the importance. And once that happens, it feeds into the project managers and the project plans.
yeah,
It has to be awareness all throughout
yeah.
the organization, really.
And you mentioned at the beginning on your intro that you've worked for both large scale organizations like Expedia, obviously Blue Nile. You've worked for startups. Are startups? I mean, you'd think that hackers would go for the large scale companies because those are the ones with the most money and those are the ones that you can impact. But and that will still be the case, I imagine. But are smaller scale organizations, startups, growth SMEs still at risk? You would think they'd be easier to attack in that
They
sort of
can be,
sense.
yes. I mean, in my experience, they're definitely easier to attack because they have less, mature, you know, security practices.
Yeah.
But there's less money to be made from them.
Yep.
So what you may find is, um, less less focus from a time perspective from the hackers.
Yeah.
So you
Okay.
may get them, you know, trying, you know, a few of the sort of standard breaches which they could try, but then if they don't get any luck, they'll move on to,
Right.
they'll move on
Okay.
to the next organization.
Yeah.
Whereas, if there's in a big organization, if there's any, you know, slight chance that, they can get in and they can make money, then they'll really focus and they'll sort of really drill down. And so yes, as a startup, yes, you're vulnerable, definitely. There's no sort of obscurity just because you're small.
Yeah.
But the again, it comes down. It's a business. It's how much money
Yeah.
um, can the bad actors make out of you, and that will, you know reflect pretty well in the amount of time they'll
They'll
put in,
spend.
trying to breach
Yeah.
their systems.
Imagine that information's quite easily accessible as well in terms of which companies generate the most revenue, and certainly when you think of e-commerce, there's certain times throughout a year that will be their busiest periods, and even I
Yes.
can figure that out without looking online. So um it's quite interesting when you think about it. There will, they won't just be a scattergun approach. It will be strategic, like you mentioned. They
Mm.
are a business too, and like it is just interesting how much it's progressed over the years. And one of the things that I think about when having this conversation is obviously technology advances day by day, month by month, year on year. And when we talk about security, I imagine it's something you have to focus on every day, all the way throughout the year. Because if it's something you leave kind of in the background and think, okay, we're completely secure, I imagine the bad actors, as you call them, are getting better every single day. So unless you focus on it every day and advance as technology does, you could end up being breached.
Absolutely, yes. It's advancing all the time, and
Mm,
yeah, I've worked with um, an external security company who provide uh, software to try and
yeah.
almost provide that first line of defense.
Mm,
And they say they're pretty much in a game of cat and mouse. They
right.
make an advance, and then they see an attack coming in which circumvents that.
Right.
And
Okay.
so they constantly have to play, um, catch up, whack-a-mole, whatever you want to call it, with the bad actors, with the hackers. And it's the same with you know, how you deal with security internally as well, because you can't. It's never done. It's not something you'll finish.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not like a project. It's as you say, it's something you constantly got to keep on top of. These security scanning plugins, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, they're really good at keeping up to date with including new potential breaches, which could be vulnerable if you don't code in a security code in a particular way. That's a really good way of keeping up to date. The timing thing you mentioned is really important as well. If
Yeah.
you can't think, all right, we're secure, we're done, and then at the peak time of your year, well, at the peak time of your year, that's when you're going to get attacked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is when people can, hackers can identify, that's when they can make the most money, because you are going to pay the most money to get back online and make sales at your peak time of year. And so it is never ending.
Yeah.
I find it like quite fascinating the way it's never ending, and you've got to
Yeah.
keep on the keep on top of everything, and how you know forgetting about security even for an instance can be can have some pretty bad impacts.
Yeah. I can imagine. Um. Well, yeah. I mean, I really appreciate your time. Jumping on the podcast. I think probably the best way to finish, I'd say, is anyone listening, whether they be leaders, engineers, what would be your key points of advice for anyone looking to implement InfoSec?
I guess personally, it's everyone's problems.
Yeah,
So it's not, you can bring in a fantastic information security officer, but you've got to get everyone on side, from as we're talking about, from top to
yeah,
bottom, from leadership, project managers, um, all the engineering teams. It's as much about education and awareness as it is about implementing security measures. Um, that's definitely one of the key things I've learned over the years. Um, the second key point is, you are going to get attacked. It's going to
yeah,
happen. How you prepare for it and how you ensure that you're as secure as possible is going to determine how well you come out the other end.
mm,
And I guess the final point is, when for people who haven't, necessarily looked at this before, it's actually a fascinating area, from
yeah.
both,
It sounds it.
an engineering perspective, from a operational perspective. It's, you know, mildly terrifying at times in terms of how advanced the hackers, the bad actors are, but it's a fascinating area, and you'll find that a lot of people when they become educated about it, when they get involved in it, are going to feel the same as well, and that's one of the best ways to get your team, get your organization security aware is let them know about it, let them find it interesting and terrifying, but and then it's it'll really help just the whole making sure that it's everyone's problem and it's not just a single person trying to fight the battle.
It kind of seems like making it a part of culture or engineering culture to focus on this.
It does need to be, if there's been, I've been in engineering and developing far too long, and you've seen the big rise of like you've got to have all your functional testing done, you've got to have all your performance testing, and I don't think security testing is really there yet. But it's
sounds like it should be.
It needs to be. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if I run a technology business, an online business, and this wasn't part of the culture, I'd struggle to sleep at night, especially after listening to this podcast. Anyway,
when you really struggle to sleep at night is when a breach happens and you know that you haven't got proper security measures there. Then it's properly worrying because you got potentially the CEO on your back saying, "When are we going to start making money again?" That's
not
when
a good
you don't
place
sleep
to
at
be.
night.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, well, yeah, like I say, I really appreciate you jumping on. Obviously, we're going to post some things on LinkedIn and the socials, so I'll tag you in, Duncan. And if anyone listening wants to reach out, I think Duncan said you're happy for people to drop you any questions that they may have. And yeah, appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Scott.
Thanks, Duncan. Cheers now.
Thanks.